Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Almost everybody is wrong about the war, the state of the economy, and where it's all going. So today I'm going to present to you a unique analysis that I assure you are not going to hear anywhere else as an explanatory model for what is coming down the road with respect towards a global mobilization for World War III. All right, so get ready. Now, part of the reason why we can argue from first principles like this is that we're not bound by any sort of ideology. I'm not beholden to the Russians. I'm not beholden to NATO. We try to view things from the ground up, and this allows a brevity of analysis that you don't really find often. And it's not hard to do. It's simply not tethering oneself to any sort of political ideology. It's pretty simple, actually, when it comes down to it. Now, this is what we're going to talk about today, okay? There is a concept called the war economy. The concept of war economy has been linked to the concept of military Keynesianism, in which the government's military budget stabilizes business cycles and fluctuates and is used to fight recessions. Some of the most powerful economies in the world were birthed from a war economy, from a general mobilization of the military for the purpose of imperialistic conquest and war. Now, there's a lot of people right now who are saying that declaring a general mobilization of the military for the Russian government would be one of the worst things that they could possibly do for their economy. Well, I beg to differ, and I'm going to try to reason with you today as to why. Not only is this likely to happen, but it really is, when considering all the options, may actually be one of the best options for the Russian economy in terms of maximizing prosperity within the situation that they've been dealt right now with the current sanctions regimen. Now, in order to explain this, we need to understand what is an economy. Now, all an economy is, in my perspective, it's people doing work to get a paycheck in order to buy goods and services, most of which are things they don't necessarily need. Luxury items, okay? They're not above food, water, shelter, and all the bare necessities. Everything else is a luxury good. It's not like we're building spaceships to traverse the cosmos. It's not like we have one grand vision of where we're going as a species. We're not. We're just wasting money. We're pissing things down the toilet. So the only difference between that kind of economy and a war economy is that you're building tanks instead of Gucci bags, okay? Now, what do you need for a war economy? Well, you need labor. You need energy. You need resources, you need patriotism, and maybe a few global creditors, although this is not necessary. So not every country can do a true war mobilization and war economy in the purest sense, where they're an independent country, functioning off of things that they find within their own borders. Not everybody can do that, because we live in such a globalized world where many countries are service-based economies that live well beyond their means. So, for example, a country like Portugal or pick any, European country or even an Asian country like Japan or something like that. They require so many external inputs into their system in order to maintain their standard of living that it would be impossible for them to independently meet their energy needs, meet their resource material needs, even meet their labor needs in some cases. And certainly a lot of these countries don't have the patriotism. We're going to talk about why that's so important in a minute. However, the Russians do, the Americans did, and the Germans pretty much did by and large back in World War II. The Russians have a pool of labor that is substantial. 140 million people. I'm not sure how many of them are able-bodied, working age. Yes, the average age is a bit older than America by like a couple years or something like that, but it's still a large pool of labor. They have an abundant means of labor, and now with their alliances they're building with the East, they also have a potential limitless amount of labor that they can import from places like North Korea or wherever. In fact, I think there is North Korean work camps in Russia, but don't quote me on that. It's just a documentary I seen by Vice many years ago. Anyways, they also have energy, boundless energy, whether it's nuclear, hydroelectric, petro-based. They have more energy than they can find. They're burning it off right now because they can't send it to Europe. What they need, and they have resources as well. And they also have access to China's rare earth minerals, because Chinese and Russian bilateral relations are at an all-time high, whereas relations between the United States is at an all-time low with both China and Russia. What they need is patriotism. So they haven't quite had the Reichstag moment that pushed the Germans over the edge in World War II to declare all-out war. They haven't quite had that they haven't quite crossed that Rubicon yet, where the entire population is ready to go to war. And for that, you almost need some threat, some existential threat. Okay, you need fear, just like what happened on 9/11. You know, that mobilized, without hesitation, mobilized the majority of the population to support interventions in the Middle East. So you need that. That's prerequisite. And that's the only real thing that is missing at this point in time. Okay? So service-based economies can't do a war-style economy because they don't have the resources, they don't have the labor, they don't have the energy. So this is not an option for every country, but it is an option for Russia. And arguably, Russia is already set the foundations for their war economy by being under sanctions for all these years. North Korea, Iran, they're all forced now to domestically source a lot of different technologies and products because sanctions prevent them from trading. Now, North Korea is a good example of a country who perhaps struggles to maintain and prosper from a war economy because they lack some of those things. They lack certain resources. They lack access to energy and a variety of other things. So this is something to keep in mind. People might say things like, well, what's Russia going to do for the chips that they need to manufacture their military equipment? Well, a thing to note about the Russian military is that historically, it's been built for exactly what we're seeing today, which is a grinding war. A war which is fought over a long period of time and requires military hardware to be low maintenance and easy to repair in the field. Okay, it has to be durable. And the more technologically sophisticated an item is, the more prone it is to and susceptible it is to things like electronic warfare and just breaking down in the field and requiring maintenance. And that's basically NATO's army in a nutshell. So while it's more capable in the short term, in the long term, in a marathon of a long drawn-out grinding war, it likely will not stand the test of time. So even the Russian military equipment that is more intricate, it's not like the chips that they need are like these top tier chips that are going to be used in supercomputers that the Taiwanese are making. They can easily source these chips from China if they don't have them on their own. Now, even the Ukrainian media outlets are saying, well, a general mobilization would be very detrimental to Putin. And here's their reasoning. They are saying that it would mean that it's a recognition that Russia has not been able to fulfill all its tasks of this special military operation that's been declared, and that it's not achieved the results. And I would beg to differ, because clearly, initially, the SMO, as it's called, Special Military Operation, was designed to dissect the Donbass and was designed to denazify, whatever, this is their words, not mine. Don't shoot, algorithmic overlords. It was designed to neutralize the threats that they seen. It was designed for a specific purpose, but then NATO came into the fight. And every Russian knows that. Every Russian knows that this is a war with NATO, and even NATO knows that. Even Joe Biden just came out and said that we're going to support Ukraine to the bitter end. So now you have guys who have been trained in NATO training centers, who are using NATO equipment, using NATO intelligence, and even have NATO operators in there. So they're fighting NATO. So this is the change. So I could understand if NATO wasn't involved and Russians were being defeated by just the hands of the Ukrainians alone. That would be a much different story. Yes, that would be an embarrassment. And then in that context, a declaration of war might not be as well received by the population. But in this case, when Russians realize the existential threat being posed by NATO, that is the grounds, I think, for a general mobilization. So this is something that you have to keep in mind, all right? Now, some people say, but won't China dislike that Russia is going to war and destabilizing international markets? Well, I've just told you that this Keynesian approach to economics is just, just being employed either in a purist Keynesian sense or in a militaristic sense will actually elevate many economies around the world. And the Chinese at this point in time, especially as Biden has just declared that he's going to defend Taiwan, and basically the one China policy is now out the window, bilateral ties between the Chinese and the Russians are stronger than they've ever been before. All that energy that was going to flow westward is now just going to flow eastward into the hands of the Indians and the Chinese and other various Asian nations, if they so choose. So, while China may say things publicly for the sake of public relations, they mean other things. They understand that they're going to war with Taiwan. So Russia on a war mobilization footing is, I can't see them taking issue with that, especially when they themselves know they're going to war with the United States. There was that one video we released, it was part of our supercut, where a guy in the protective suit, pandemic protective suit, was trying to pull a Chinese resident off the bus. This is in Shanghai, I believe. And he's arguing with this person who wasn't wearing a mask on the bus, and she was being detained or whatever. And he's like, don't you realize that we are going to war with the Americans? You need to do your part. So this is in the minds of the CCP that someday they are going to war with the United States. So why do people assume then that the Chinese are going to take issue with a Russian war mobilization if they know it's inevitable? If they know they are inevitably going to have to engage the United States, why wouldn't they want them to be more preoccupied and weakened by Russia first? Okay, so this idea that it's going to destabilize the global markets and it's going to cause these wild fluctuations in the price of various commodities that other countries rely on. Yes, India might be a little upset that the price of grains and fertilizers and other things like this are so high, but they also, to compensate for that, they're getting cheap oil, at least for now. They're getting discounted Russian oil because they can't sell it anywhere else. And of course, they're flipping it for a profit. Not that that's enough to perhaps outdo the detriments caused to their economy. But again, it's, I hate to say it, but beggars can't be choosers. I mean, that's what it simply comes down to. Now, people are also saying that, oh, it's the West that secretly wants Russia to mobilize for war. I haven't seen any Western media outlet say that they think Russia should do a general mobilization. I haven't even heard the word general mobilization uttered in the mainstream media. In fact, I think they're very worried about this because they know if the Russians were to bring the full force of their military and turn their economy into a war economy, which is what they've pretty much done. Okay, so you have the sanctions, which for years have been forcing them to be more self-reliant. You have the War Powers Act, or whatever it was that was enacted a while back, a few months ago, that basically got private industry on board with the war machine. You're also having various conscription drives, drives for more volunteers, and they're putting the feelers out to gauge public reception to a general mobilization. So they're really one step away from it. And you may say, well, you know, the Russians need global creditors in order to fuel domestic progress and industrial boons. But I would say that I would disagree. I would say that they have everything they need in order to do it. And I don't think that that's required in their case. That might be the case if they were a service-based economy. Even Germany ran very large deficits after the Weimar Republic to build their economy. And, you know, off the promise of the spoils of their conquest, they were going to pay back all of these debts. I don't think Russia necessarily has to do that, but I also think that people must realize that if Russia does start taking territories, there is going to be monetary gains made. I mean, even just the monetary gain made by conquering a place like Ukraine is vast. I mean, there's just vast material wealth in a country like that Russia would now control. I'm not saying this is what I want. I'm just saying I'm trying to view this from a strictly objectivist point of view, okay? Now, in the Weimar Republic example, there was this mission that Hitler had to achieve national economic self-sufficiency. So this resulted in a reduction in foreign trade, boosting of rationing within the country, and they believed that war was the primary engine of human progress. This is like the essence of that Keynesian economics, is that war is the primary engine of human progress, and argued that the purpose of a country's economy should be to enable that country to fight and win wars of expansion. And yes, like I said, the military buildup was built up by deficit spending, but Russia isn't running a huge debt right now. And you have a lot of developing countries who are going to rely on Russia's resources moving forward. Now, we already have talks of Putin warning about serious responses to Ukrainian terror acts, okay? And this is after a lot of stuff. People have been offed in Russia, inside Russia, assassinations. You have bombings of places like Belgorod. You have, you know, just targeting of Crimea, places that Russia believes is its territory. So even though they're not declaring, or they're not showing any indication that they're moving towards a general mobilization, in spite of the fact that there is increasing amounts of rhetoric on state media, in Duma, and debates, and everywhere, that this is what they should be doing, the pressure is on right now in order to do that. They don't want to do that until the time is right. So here's what I suspect could happen. I suspect that if there is another major incident where a lot of Russian civilians are targeted, I think that that's the final thing that they would need to really go into a war-style economy. And we're not far from that. People think, oh, we've evolved, and, you know, the Russian people want McDonald's and you know, trendy music and Netflix and stuff like this. I don't know if that's true. I mean, maybe you guys can share some perspective. I don't think that's enough to prevent this descent back into a war economic cycle. And even the United States right now and many European countries are going to be looking at this. I mean, they're already talking about increased military spending. And increased military spending does have the knock-on effects of creating more stimulus in other areas of the economy. Because again, you could say, well, you're just wasting money on tanks and stuff. Well, we're just wasting money on bigger TVs and, you know, newer phones. We're wasting money all the time anyways. So a real economist would look at that and say, okay, there's really no difference. The only difference is, and this is the big difference, and this is what I understand now about what was being said with the German approach in saying that the primary engine of human progress is war, is that the difference between a country engineering a tank and engineering 100,000 extra iPhones that they don't need is that the tank actually will serve a greater purpose. I mean, you might argue that the iPhones increase the standard of living and thus increase human productivity. Maybe you could make that argument, but do you need a new iPhone to increase? Or does the tank itself actually serve the purpose of expansionism? And not only that, ensuring national security, giving a country more bargaining power on a global stage. I've rambled on long enough. What do you guys think about this theory? I think that we are going to descend into a war economic cycle, not only for the Russians, but also for the Americans. So I don't believe these arguments, and I think I've covered most of them, that people are making, that they think it's impossible that Russia would declare something like this. I think that they stand to gain by going all out and doing a general mobilization and just getting on that war economic footing. Let me know what you guys think about in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out, and stay tuned. We got our weekend update, our summary of the events of the weekend coming up in a few hours. Thanks for watching, guys. You take care. Canadian Prepper out.